They thought she was crazy. A widowed single mother, barely scraping by, spending every last dollar on a decaying piece of land no one wanted. But Naomi Bellamy wasn't chasing a fantasy. She was chasing a future. What she didn't know was that buried beneath the rotting floorboards of that forgotten farm was a secret that would shake the entire town to its core. A secret untouched for over a century. With her 14-year-old son Jasper, quiet, thoughtful, far older than his years, and her fearless 10-year-old daughter Mira by her side, Naomi made a decision that would change everything. People whispered. They doubted. But they didn't see what she saw. And what they never expected was what that old farm was hiding all along. Stonehill Orchard had once been the pride of Rivertown Valley, a sweeping 120-acre property with a grand white farmhouse, a red-roofed barn, and rows upon rows of apple trees that painted the hillsides with blossoms every spring. But that was a long time ago. For the last 5 years, it had sat in silence. The paint peeled in long, tired strips. The barn sagged under the weight of storms it could no longer withstand. Fences once built to keep livestock safe now leaned like old men too proud to fall. The orchard, once neatly pruned and bursting with fruit, had grown wild. Its trees tangled and forgotten, branches heavy with apples that dropped and rotted in the grass year after year. Most people drove past it without a second glance. Some called it cursed. Others called it worthless. But Naomi Bellamy, she saw something else. Ever since her husband Jonah passed away from a sudden illness 3 years ago, Naomi had been running on fumes. She worked mornings as a school cafeteria attendant and spent her evenings cleaning offices just to keep food on the table and rent paid. Life was a constant rotation of alarm clocks, double shifts, and saying, maybe next time, to every dream she'd ever had. She never complained, not out loud, but it wore her down in the quiet moments, in the way she sighed when the kids weren't listening or in how her hands trembled just slightly when she counted out change at the grocery store. Her son Jasper, now 14, had taken on responsibilities far beyond his age. He walked his little sister to school, helped her with homework, and even learned to cook simple meals on nights Naomi didn't get home before bedtime. He never said it, but he missed his dad. And Mira, just 10, still asked questions about why the world had to be so unfair. Naomi had no answers. Only hope. Hope that someday, somehow, she'd find a way to give her kids more than survival. A chance to grow. To run. To belong somewhere that didn't come with thin walls, shared stairwells, and the constant sound of sirens in the night. That's why the orchard pulled at her heart. Every time they passed by it on the bus or during errands, she'd catch herself staring, imagining what it might feel like to wake up to birdsong instead of car alarms, to let her children climb trees and breathe clean air, to rebuild something with her own 2 hands instead of always patching things up. It wasn't just a piece of land, it was a second chance. But dreams, no matter how rooted they were in purpose, cost money. And Naomi didn't have much left. She'd managed to squirrel away the last of Jonah's life insurance, $32,000 in total. Not enough to buy the property outright, but maybe enough to make a bid. She had applied for every loan imaginable, local banks, credit unions, even online lenders, but rejection followed her at every turn. Her credit was shot, her income was modest, and no one wanted to gamble on a single mom trying to buy a broken farm. And then came the news that chilled her to the bone. Crestline Holdings, a powerful real estate development firm with a reputation for gutting the soul out of small towns, was interested in Stonehill Orchard. They had already scooped up 4 other rural properties in the valley, bulldozing the old homes and orchards to replace them with gray cookie-cutter townhouses and faux farm-style homes with vinyl siding. They called it revitalization. Locals called it a land grab. Naomi knew what Crestline would do to Stonehill. They'd tear out every tree, demolish every stone wall, and erase every story the land still carried. And that terrified her more than losing a bid. Because if they got their hands on it, her dream wouldn't just die, it would be paved over and forgotten. She had one shot, one auction, one chance to fight for something no bank believed in. She wasn't just bidding on land. She was betting on hope. The morning of the auction arrived with a strange stillness in the air. Naomi barely slept the night before. She had lain awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling of their cramped two-bedroom apartment, running the numbers over and over in her head. Every calculation led to the same result. Her absolute limit was $110,000. No more. Not even a dollar beyond. That number was a tightrope between her entire savings and the tiny personal loan she'd managed to secure. Just enough to register for the auction, but nowhere near enough to outbid a corporate giant like Crestland Holdings. Still, she dressed carefully that morning, as if confidence could be stitched into her sleeves. Jasper wore his one good button-up shirt, trying to look mature beyond his years. Mira carried her small green backpack and a smooth river stone she called her Lucky Charm. The three of them drove in silence to the auction site, watching the landscape shift from city outskirts to open fields. Naomi could feel the tension pressing into her chest, but she held onto a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, this would be the day things changed. When they arrived, the scene was even more overwhelming than she'd imagined. The old farmhouse loomed in the distance, weathered but still standing tall, its windows like tired eyes watching the crowd gather. Dozens of cars were parked along the dirt road, some with out-of-town plates. Local families mingled with men in crisp button-downs, wearing Bluetooth earpieces and tapping away on their tablets. Naomi didn't need to ask who they were. She recognized the Crestland insignia stitched onto their laptop bags like a warning. At the registration table, Naomi handed over her identification and the required proof of funds. The auction staff handed her a bidder's card, number 16, then moved on to the next person without so much as a smile. She stood there for a moment, clutching the card like it was made of glass. "You okay, Mom?" Jasper asked, gently bumping her elbow. Naomi nodded, not trusting her voice. The auctioneer, a rotund man with a booming voice and a bright red tie, stood on a makeshift platform near the barn. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, "welcome to the public auction for the property known as Stonehill Orchard. This is a 120-acre parcel, including the original farmhouse, outbuildings, and established, but currently unmanaged, orchard. Due to foreclosure proceedings, bidding will start at $85,000. Naomi's heart pounded in her ears. This was it. "Do I hear 85? The auctioneer asked. Naomi raised her card. 85 from bidder 16. "Do I hear 90? A man near the back, one of the Crestland suits, immediately raised his card. 90 from bidder 22. "Do I hear 95? Naomi raised hers again. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't care. 95 from 16. 100. Bidder 22 again, the auctioneer said, nodding. 100. 105. Naomi didn't hesitate. She raised her card once more. The numbers kept climbing. 110. That was her ceiling. The end of the road. She lifted her card one final time. Her stomach clenched so tight it felt like a fist. 110 from bidder 16. "Do I hear 115? Bidder 22 didn't even blink. His card shot up like a reflex. Naomi lowered her card. She could feel Myra's hand tighten around hers. Jasper stared at the ground. The auctioneer glanced around. 115 going once. Going twice. Naomi took a deep breath and braced herself. Then a voice rang out from the back. Clear, firm, and unexpected. 120. The crowd shifted. Heads turned. Naomi turned too. It was a woman. 60s, maybe early 70s. Silver hair pulled into a neat twist. She wore dark jeans, boots, and a blazer that looked both practical and expensive. Her bidder number was 8. She didn't flinch under the attention, just nodded calmly at the auctioneer. Bidder 22 from Crestland looked caught off guard. But after a moment, he raised his card again. 125, the auctioneer called. The silver-haired woman didn't wait. 130, she said smoothly. The murmurs spread like wildfire through the crowd. No one expected the price to shoot this high. Not for a broken farm in the middle of nowhere. Not this fast. 135, the auctioneer prompted. Bidder 22 again. 135. The woman raised her card without hesitation. $150. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Bitter 22 glanced at his colleague, whispered something into his Bluetooth, and finally shook his head. $150 going once. Going twice. The auctioneer brought the gavel down hard. Sold. To bidder number 8. Naomi felt her legs go weak. It was over. She had lost. After everything. After the years of working 2 jobs, saving every penny, whispering dreams into her children's ears. After all of it, the farm was gone. Mira looked up at her, eyes wide and wet. Jasper just stared at the orchard in silence. Naomi tried to speak, to comfort them, but the words stuck in her throat like dust. As the crowd began to disperse, Naomi turned to leave. That's when she felt a gentle hand on her arm. "You're Naomi Bellamy, aren't you?" Naomi turned. It was the woman who had won the bid. "I'm Evelyn Hartman," the woman said, extending her hand. "Director of the Heritage Roots Trust." Naomi blinked, too surprised to speak. "I know what you were trying to do," Evelyn continued. "And I'd like to talk to you about a partnership. I think Stonehill Orchard might still be in your future, if you're willing to take a leap of faith." Naomi didn't know it yet, but that one conversation was about to change everything. Naomi hadn't expected to return to the very farm she had just lost, at least not so soon. She had driven away from the auction with her children silent in the back seat, the weight of disappointment pressing against her chest like a stone. But that afternoon, as she tried to distract herself by folding laundry and answering Jasper's quiet questions with half-hearted reassurances, her phone rang. It was Evelyn Hartman. "I'd like to meet," the woman said simply. "At the diner. Tomorrow. Noon." And so, the next day, Naomi found herself sitting across from the woman who had outbid Crestline Holdings and, in the process, stolen what felt like her last chance. Evelyn didn't waste time with small talk. A manila folder sat between them on the table. She slid it across without fanfare. "I'm offering you a proposal," she said. "Unconventional, perhaps, but I think it suits you." Naomi opened the folder, her eyes scanning the words. It was a formal document, complete with letterhead from something called the Heritage Roots Trust. It outlined a long-term lease, 99 years, with exclusive living and working rights to Stonehill Orchard. Naomi would receive startup funds, seed money for restoring the orchard, renovating the buildings, and launching a small business on site. In return, the land itself would remain under the trust's ownership to ensure long-term preservation. But everything Naomi built, the orchard business, the infrastructure, the brand, would be hers. "You wouldn't be my employee," Evelyn clarified. "You'd be my partner. You'd live there, manage it, restore it, and ultimately decide what it becomes. I believe in adaptive preservation, not freezing things in time, but giving old spaces new life." Naomi closed the folder slowly, unsure what to say. Her heart was pounding. It sounded like a dream, but that was the problem. Dreams were dangerous. They could break you. "Why me?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, almost cautious. "I'm a waitress with no degree. No business background. No money. Just a few memories of apple picking with my grandfather." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Exactly," she said. "You've kept a vision alive when it would have been easier to let it go. You didn't just want a house or land. You wanted a purpose. And that's exactly what this place needs." Naomi stared at her, unsure whether to feel honored or overwhelmed. In the corner booth, Mira sipped chocolate milk and traced shapes in the condensation on her glass. Jasper leaned forward, reading through the document with the focus of someone far too grown-up for 14. "This talks about mentorship," Jasper said. "You'd be helping us get started?" Evelyn nodded. "You'd have access to my network, agricultural advisors, restoration experts, legal support. The trust helps families like yours revive rural spaces and make them economically viable again." "And if it fails?" Naomi asked. "If we sink everything into this and still end up with nothing?" "Then you'll have failed doing something meaningful," Evelyn replied without flinching. "Not everyone gets that chance." Mira looked up from her drawing. Mom, what if we lived there? What if that bedroom with a window seat was mine? Naomi's heart clenched. She had seen that bedroom during the open house. Dusty, yes, but filled with light. Mira had picked it out instantly. Still, she needed more. This was her life. Her children's lives. She couldn't enter blindly, no matter how noble the cause. I won't do it, Naomi said carefully, unless there's a clear path to ownership. I won't work this land for 5 or 10 years only to walk away. I want the option to buy it one day. At a fair price. With credit for everything we've built. Evelyn studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. That's reasonable. I'll have the agreement amended. Ownership isn't off the table. But protection is the priority. That land has survived because someone fought to preserve it. You'd be joining that fight, not just for yourself, but for the land's future too. Naomi sat back, the reality settling in. This wasn't just a gift. It was a challenge. A test of her resilience, her belief, her courage. It meant uprooting her entire life, learning everything from the ground up, taking risks that no one else would take for her. But she wasn't alone. Jasper looked ready to build an entire orchard that very moment. Mira beamed as if she'd already planted her garden. For the first time in years, Naomi saw possibility in their eyes. Real, tangible, growing possibility. She reached across the table and closed the folder with purpose. Then I'm in, she said. Let's bring Stonehill back to life. Evelyn smiled, not the smile of someone who'd won an auction, but of someone who had just chosen the right person to carry forward something precious. And in that moment, Naomi Bellamy stopped surviving. She started building. 2 weeks later, the Bellamys stood in the middle of Stonehill Orchard, not as visitors, but as its new stewards. The small caretaker's cottage had become their temporary home, and while the space was tight and the repairs far from complete, there was something deeply comforting about waking up to the sound of wind in the trees instead of traffic. Naomi still couldn't believe it. Not just the partnership with Evelyn Hartman, but the fact that people she barely knew had shown up to help them move. Friends from the diner donated tools and supplies. A retired carpenter volunteered to patch the roof of the cottage. Someone even left a welcome basket with fresh bread and jars of homemade jam on their porch. It wasn't just a move, it was a homecoming Naomi didn't know she'd been waiting for. But the real work had only just begun. Day after day, Naomi, Jasper, and Mira rolled up their sleeves. There were weeds to pull, debris to clear, and buildings to inspect. It was during one of these early cleanup days that they met Finn Marley, a spry man in his 70s with sun-leathered skin, a weathered flannel shirt, and a crooked smile. Evelyn had mentioned he'd served as caretaker of the property before it was abandoned, and now, retired but restless, he was eager to lend a hand. Place has been sleeping for too long, he told Naomi as he examined the barn's collapsed side. Time to wake her up. Naomi liked him instantly. So did Jasper, who shadowed him with a quiet admiration, absorbing every tip Finn gave about wood restoration and tool maintenance. Mira, meanwhile, declared herself head of small things, and began cataloging every rusty hinge and cracked window pane she found with solemn precision. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills and dust swirled in golden rays through the open windows, Naomi wandered into the main farmhouse. She had avoided it at first. The building felt like it held more memories than walls. But today, something pulled her inside. The air was thick with age. Floorboards creaked beneath her boots. The room smelled faintly of old paper, mildew, and the ghost of something sweet, perhaps apples, or time itself. She moved slowly through what had once been a living room, brushing her fingers along the stone fireplace when something caught her eye. A floorboard, just one, had a different grain. Slightly lighter. Less worn. Finn, she called. Within minutes, Jasper, Mira, and Finn stood beside her. Together, they examined the board. Finn pressed on the edge. Nothing. Then Jasper knelt, tapping until he found a hollow echo. Mira, eyes wide, pointed. There's something under there. With a firm press on the opposite side, the floorboard shifted. And as it lifted, stiff, hesitant, reluctant after decades, they revealed a shallow compartment beneath the floor. Empty, but unmistakably crafted for secrecy. Finn chuckled low. Well now, looks like old Augustus Stonehill might have had a few secrets after all. And they were just getting started. The discovery of the hidden compartment was only the beginning. A few days later, with Finn's help and a bit of luck, they located a second opening, this time behind a loose panel in the farmhouse cellar wall. What lay inside wasn't gold bars or jewels, but something far more powerful. A sealed iron safe, rusted with age and etched with a faint S for Stonehill. It took hours of careful maneuvering and more than one attempt with borrowed tools. But finally, the heavy door creaked open to reveal a collection of forgotten treasures. An old leather-bound journal, several handwritten documents on apple cultivation, a letter addressed to the future stewards of Stonehill Orchard, and tucked deep in the back, a small cloth sack filled with antique gold coins. Naomi held the journal as if it were glass. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate. On the first page, the name ***Augustus Stonehill** was scrawled in ink that had faded but not disappeared. As the family read the letter aloud at the kitchen table that night, a quiet stillness filled the room. In it, Augustus spoke directly to them, or rather to whoever would someday care for the orchard. He wrote of apple varieties he had been experimenting with, of preserving the land, and of a hope that his work might serve not only the present generation, but many more to come. The tone was humble, but his vision was vast, and it stirred something in Naomi that even the promise of a fresh start had not fully awakened. The next morning, Naomi contacted the State University's Agricultural Extension Office and described what they had found. A few days later, a specialist arrived, Dr. Keisha Morgan, a pomologist with a quiet voice and sharp eyes. She spent hours walking through the overgrown orchard, scribbling notes, taking samples, and occasionally pausing to mutter, "This isn't in any of the standard catalogs." Her final report came with a mix of excitement and urgency. "You have something unique here," she told Naomi, holding a branch plucked from one of the older trees. "At least 5 of these apple varieties don't match any of the known commercial or heritage cultivars in our database. They're resilient, still producing after decades of neglect. This isn't just a historical footnote. This is a living treasure." Dr. Morgan dubbed the trees the Stonehill Originals. She believed they could be the foundation of something entirely new, not just in academic research, but in the local economy. And that's when the idea hit Naomi. Cider. Not the mass-produced kind found in grocery stores, but small-batch, artisanal cider made from apples no one else in the world could offer. A product with a story. A legacy in every bottle. With Dr. Morgan's support and Evelyn's connections, Naomi began drafting a business plan. She named the venture Stonehill Revival. The branding came naturally. Jasper designed the label himself, incorporating sketches from Augustus's journal. Mira contributed pressed flowers from the orchard and handwrote the first few labels. Naomi reached out to a local carpenter who helped them repurpose the smaller barn into a basic but functional fermentation space. Evelyn offered funds from the Heritage Roots Trust to cover the equipment and materials needed to start small. But even more powerful than the financial help was what came next. The town itself showed up. When word of Naomi's discovery and plans spread through Rivertown Valley, something stirred. Locals who once scoffed at the idea of restoring the orchard now asked how they could help. A group of high school agriculture students volunteered to help prune and clear the orchard, calling it part of their living classroom. 2 local restaurant owners offered to carry the cider once it was bottled. An elderly couple showed up with crates of vintage cider-making books. And Margaret from the diner started a fundraiser jar on the counter, which quickly filled with small bills and encouraging notes from patrons. The community, long disillusioned by Crestline Holdings and the slow erasure of Rivertown's history, had found something they believed in, something they could build, protect, and claim as their own. And Naomi no longer felt like an outsider. For the first time since Jonah's death, she wasn't just holding things together. She was watching something grow. Something rooted. Something real. Stonehill Revival wasn't just about cider. It was about belonging. As word of Stonehill Revival spread and the orchard came back to life, not everyone was celebrating. Crestline Holdings had gone quiet in the months following the auction, but silence from a corporation like that rarely meant surrender. Behind the scenes, they were regrouping, planning. And when they returned, they didn't come back with threats or lawsuits. They came back with money. It was a cool spring morning when a black SUV pulled up the gravel drive to the farmhouse. Naomi was planting early vegetables in the caretaker's garden when the car door opened and a sharply dressed man stepped out, portfolio in hand and a polished smile on his face. "Miss Bellamy," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "David Langston, Acquisitions Director for Crestland Holdings. I'd like to speak with you, briefly." Naomi stood slowly, brushing soil from her gloves. "We've got nothing to discuss," she said, but he continued. $3 million, he said flatly. "That's what we're offering. Right now. For the land, the house, the orchard. Everything." Naomi stared at him, stunned. Not by the number, but by the assumption that she could be bought. That Stonehill was just another property in Crestland's spreadsheet. "You're offering $3 million to bulldoze this place?" she asked, voice low. He didn't blink. "To build something modern, efficient, profitable. Think of what you could do with that kind of money. Set your children up for life." Naomi looked past him, toward the orchard where Jasper and Mira were tying support strings to young saplings grafted from the original trees. She thought of Augustus Stonehill's journal, of the gold coins still tucked in a lockbox, of the community who had rallied behind them. She turned back to Langston and shook her head. "You don't get it. This place isn't just a story to sell, or a scenic backdrop for a brochure. It's history. It's hope. It's a future that isn't paved over with condos and clubhouses." Langston's smile faded. "You'll regret this," he said, voice tight. "We're not going away." Naomi's voice was steady. "Neither are we." Days later, she stood beside Evelyn Hartman at a packed town hall meeting. Word had spread about Crestland's new push for zoning changes and development permits. Langston was there too, presenting glossy renderings of luxury homes and country club amenities, talking about job creation and economic progress. Then Naomi took the microphone. She wasn't a practiced speaker. She didn't have a PowerPoint. But her words came from something deeper. "You can't put a price tag on heritage," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "We've lost enough to concrete and greed. This town deserves more than hollow promises. Stonehill isn't just ours. It's Rivertown's. It's every memory in these hills, every hand that helped us prune those trees, every child who learned where food comes from. If we let this go, we lose more than land. We lose ourselves." The room went silent, and just like that, the battle lines were drawn. The town meeting proved to be a turning point. In the weeks that followed, the county commissioners requested further environmental studies, public input, and independent assessments of the proposed Crestland development. And as the facts came in, one thing became increasingly clear. Rivertown Valley didn't want more hollow estates or luxury golf courses. It wanted roots. It wanted identity. It wanted Stonehill. After months of tense deliberations, the county announced its decision. Crestland's project was indefinitely delayed pending further zoning review. But more importantly, the land encompassing Stonehill Orchard was granted official heritage agricultural site designation. That meant protection. That meant permanence. That meant the story Naomi and her children had fought for could continue to grow. The orchard bloomed brighter than ever that spring. Jasper cider label design, featuring a sketched apple tree with the words Stonehill Revival, born from legacy, caught the eye of a popular farm-to-table restaurant downtown. Then another. Soon, Naomi's small batch cider was being poured at dinners, festivals, and even picked up by a local distributor. Not in massive numbers, but just enough to prove this place had value far beyond the land itself. On a warm May afternoon, Naomi stood beneath a canopy of blossoms in the North Orchard. The Stonehill originals were thriving, thanks to Dr. Morgan's grafting work and the tireless care of so many hands. Finn Marley leaned on a rake nearby, offering one of his quiet smiles. Mira was chasing butterflies with a mason jar. Jasper, clipboard in hand, was testing soil pH for their summer planting. But they weren't alone. Neighbors, friends, and curious visitors now walked the property regularly. Some came to volunteer, others to learn, and some simply to experience the peace that lingered in the air like honeyed wind. Evelyn Hartman visited often, sometimes bringing potential partners for other preservation projects. But she always walked this orchard last, with Naomi by her side, two women from different eras, bound by the same belief. That land isn't just something we own. It's something we honor. Stonehill was more than a revival. It was a resurrection. And as Naomi looked around, at her children, her community, her orchard in bloom, she didn't just feel pride. She felt home. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of starting over, don't forget to subscribe. More true stories of hope, heritage, and heart are coming soon. And we promise, you won't want to miss what's next.